The autumn wind whispered through Sunset Grove Cemetery, scattering golden leaves across the polished granite headstones. Marcus Chen adjusted his cashmere coat. More out of habit than necessity, the cold didn't bother him anymore. Not since that day 3 years ago when his world had frozen in place. His Italian leather shoes crunched softly against the gravel path as he made his way through the maze of monuments. Other visitors might have needed a map to navigate the sprawling grounds, but Marcus could find his way blindfolded. 3 years of weekly visits had carved the route into his soul as deeply as grief had carved lines into his face. Chentech Industries stock had hit another record high this morning. His assistant had tried to schedule an emergency board meeting, but Marcus had silenced her with a look. October 15th was sacrosanct. No meetings, no calls, no emergencies. His billions could wait. Today belonged to Michael. The headstone stood exactly as it had last week, gleaming black granite with gold inlay. Michael James Chen, 2009 to 2021. Beloved son who touched the stars too soon. Marcus traced the letters with trembling fingers, remembering how Michael had insisted on rewriting his college application essay for the 4th time the night before everything changed. "Hey, buddy," Marcus whispered, lowering himself to the manicured grass. He placed a small model rocket next to the fresh roses, the same type they used to launch together in the park behind their house. "I brought your favorite. Remember how you calculated the exact angle for maximum height? You always were too smart for your own good." His voice cracked on the last word. 12 years old, just 12 years old, and already planning to revolutionize space travel. Now all those dreams lay buried 6 feet deep, while Marcus's empire of silicon and circuits felt hollow as a ghost town. A sound drifted across the cemetery, so faint at first that Marcus thought he was imagining it, but there it was again, a young voice, animated and clear, cutting through the somber atmosphere like a ray of sunshine through storm clouds. And then Jenny said I couldn't possibly run that fast, but I did. I mean, I got winded pretty quick, but the doctor said that's normal and I'm getting stronger every day. Oh, and I got on my science project, the one about heart rates during exercise. Pretty cool, right? Marcus rose slowly, curiosity drawing him toward the voice. 3 rows over, partially hidden behind a towering angel statue, he found its source, a boy, no more than 12, sitting cross-legged on the ground. He wore faded jeans with patches on the knees and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. His black hair stuck up in wild tufts, as if he'd just rolled out of bed. But it wasn't the boy's appearance that made Marcus's heart stutter to a stop. It was the headstone. The child was so animatedly chatting with Michael's headstone. The boy must have sensed Marcus's presence because he suddenly looked up, brown eyes widening in surprise. He scrambled to his feet, dusting grass from his jeans. "I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't doing anything wrong, I promise. I come here sometimes to talk." Marcus stood frozen, unable to process the scene before him. For 3 years he'd guarded this spot like a private shrine, barely acknowledging other mourners. Yet here was this child, treating it like a friend's backyard. "This is private property," Marcus said, his voice rougher than intended. Then he winced, correcting himself. "I mean, this is my son's grave." The boy's face paled slightly, and Marcus noticed something he hadn't before, a thin scar peeking out from beneath the collar of his worn t-shirt. "You're Michael's dad?" the boy asked softly. "I'm Tommy Rivera." He shuffled his feet nervously, then lifted his chin with unexpected determination. "I hope it's okay that I visit him. He saved my life." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The scar, the comments about getting stronger, about heart rates. Memory crashed over him, signing papers in a sterile hospital room, authorizing organ donation while his world crumbled around him. The doctors had said Michael's death would give others a chance to live, but Marcus had never sought out the recipients. The thought had been too painful. "You were the heart recipient," Marcus whispered, his knees suddenly weak. Tommy nodded, unconsciously touching his chest. "The doctors said I had maybe a month left when they found a match. Your son," his voice wavered slightly. "He gave me a second chance." Marcus sank to his knees, eye level with Tommy. Up close he could see the boy's eyes were flecked with gold, just like Michael's had been. "May I?" he asked, hand hovering near Tommy's chest. Tommy hesitated only a moment before nodding. Marcus placed his palm over the boy's heart, his son's heart, feeling its strong, steady rhythm. Each beat seemed to whisper of miracles and second chances, of life continuing in unexpected ways. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt something crack in his frozen world. As tears slid down his cheeks, Tommy reached out and awkwardly patted his shoulder. Sometimes Tommy said quietly, "When I'm having a rough day, I come here and talk to him. I tell him about all the stuff I get to do now, thanks to him. I want him to know he swallowed hard. I want him to know his gift isn't being wasted." Marcus looked up at the boy, this stranger who carried a piece of his son, who spoke to Michael's grave with such genuine care. In that moment, something shifted in the universe, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. "Would you?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Would you tell me about some of those things you get to do now?" Tommy's face lit up with a smile that transformed his entire being. As he settled back onto the grass and began to talk, Marcus felt the October wind soften, carrying with it the faintest whisper of hope. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself looking forward to Saturdays at Sunset Grove. Tommy would be there without fail, sometimes with homework spread across the grass, other times just sitting quietly. Today the boy was reading a worn paperback, its spine cracked and pages dog-eared. The Martian Chronicles, Marcus noted, recognizing the cover. Michael loved that book. Tommy carefully marked his page with a tattered bookmark. "Mrs. Martinez, she's my foster mum, she got it for me from the library sale. Said I needed something besides textbooks to read." The casual mention of foster care made Marcus's chest tighten. He'd wondered about Tommy's circumstances but hadn't wanted to pry. "How long have you been with Mrs. Martinez?" 8 months, Tommy replied, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "She's nice, better than some of the others. At least she lets me come here." He paused, then added quietly, "I've been in the system since I was 6. Mum couldn't stay clean. Dad was never in the picture." Marcus sat down beside Tommy, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "That must be hard." "It's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but Tommy's fingers brushed his chest unconsciously. "I'm alive. That's more than I thought I'd be 2 years ago." The memory crashed over Marcus like an icy wave. 2 years ago, he closed his eyes, and suddenly he was back on that mountain, watching Michael race down the slope one last time. He was always fearless, Marcus heard himself say. Too fearless. The conditions were bad that day, heavy snow, low visibility. I should have said no when he begged for one more run, his voice cracked. The avalanche, it happened so fast. Tommy listened intently, his hand still resting over his heart, Michael's heart. Did it hurt? No, Marcus whispered. The doctors said he never felt pain. He was in a coma, and they told me he swallowed hard. They told me there was no brain activity. That's when they asked about organ donation. Was it a hard decision? Tommy asked softly. Marcus stared at Michael's headstone, remembering those terrible hours in the hospital. The hardest and easiest decision I've ever made. Hard because it felt like giving up hope, like admitting he was really gone. Easy because he turned to Tommy. Easy because Michael would have wanted it. He was always trying to help people. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes I feel guilty. Like, why did I deserve his heart? There were probably better kids, smarter kids, kids with real families. Stop. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. Michael's heart wasn't a prize for the most deserving. It was a gift. And from what I've seen, you honor that gift every day. But I'm nothing special, Tommy protested. I'm just me. Average grades, can't even run a full mile yet. The only thing interesting about me is this, he tapped his chest. Marcus shook his head. You're the kid who spends his Saturdays talking to my son's grave, making sure he knows his gift mattered. That's not nothing, Tommy. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching leaves dance across the graves. Finally, Tommy spoke again. I have to show you something. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a slightly crumpled envelope. It's my latest heart checkup results. The doctors say, his voice wobbled with pride. They say it's the healthiest transplant they've seen in someone my age. Marcus took the envelope with trembling hands. The medical terminology was complex, but the conclusion was clear. Tommy's body had accepted Michael's heart completely. It was thriving. Mrs. Martinez says I shouldn't get too excited about stuff bad for my heart, Tommy continued. But I can't help it. Next week, they're letting me try out for the school swim team. Nothing competitive, just the practice squad, but still. Michael was a swimmer, Marcus said softly. Junior state champion in the 100-meter butterfly. Tommy's eyes widened. Really? I didn't know that. Maybe that's why I love being in the water so much now. The doctors said sometimes transplant recipients develop new interests similar to their donors. Marcus felt something warm unfurl in his chest, not quite happiness, but perhaps its distant cousin. Would you tell me how it happened? Your heart condition. Tommy drew his knees up to his chest. I was born with it, hyperplastic left heart syndrome. Had my first surgery when I was 3 days old. The doctors kept trying different procedures, but nothing worked right. By the time I was 10, I was basically living in the hospital. He gestured at the grave. Then one day they told me they had a match. Perfect size, perfect blood type, everything. I was scared, but I remember thinking anything was better than just waiting till he trailed off. Afterward, when I was stronger, I asked about my donor. They couldn't tell me much, just that he was a boy my age who died in an accident. But I needed to thank his family somehow. How did you find us? Marcus asked. Tommy blushed. I kind of did some research. There aren't that many 12-year-old boys who died in skiing accidents that day. When I found the news article about Michael, I saw he was buried here. I just wanted to visit once, to say thank you. But then, it felt right, talking to him. Like he was listening. Is that weird? Marcus thought about all his one-sided conversations at this grave. No, he said. It's not weird at all. A phone buzzed, and Tommy pulled out a battered flip phone. Mrs. Martinez, he explained. I need to head back. It's my turn to help with dinner. As Tommy packed up his book, Marcus found himself reluctant to let the moment end. Would it be okay if I came by next Saturday? Maybe we could talk more. Tommy's smile could have lit up the darkening cemetery. I'd like that, and I think he glanced at Michael's headstone. I think he would too. Marcus watched the boy walk away, his figure growing smaller against the sunset. For the first time since losing Michael, the weight of grief felt slightly lighter, transformed by the presence of a boy who carried his son's heart, and somehow, a trace of his spirit too. He touched the cold granite of the headstone. Thank you, he whispered, and wasn't sure if he was thanking Michael for the gift of his heart, or Tommy for the gift of his Saturday visits. Maybe, he realized, they were part of the same miracle. The autumn chill had given way to winter's bite when Tommy missed their first Saturday meeting. Marcus waited for 2 hours, worry gnawing at his stomach, before heading home. By the third Saturday without Tommy, panic had set in. He found himself parked outside the Martinez residence, a modest duplex in East Side, debating whether to knock. Before he could decide, the front door opened, and Tommy emerged, dragging a garbage bag to the curb. The boy froze when he saw Marcus's Tesla. I'm sorry, Tommy blurted out as Marcus approached. I should have told you, but I didn't know how. Behind Tommy, moving boxes were stacked in the doorway. Marcus's heart sank. You're moving. Mrs. Martinez appeared in the doorway, a small woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. Mr. Chen? Tommy's told me so much about you. Please come in. We should talk. Inside, Mrs. Martinez explained over coffee. Her sister in Arizona had suffered a stroke. She needs full-time care, and I'm the only family she has left. I've already arranged for Tommy's transfer to the Phoenix foster system. When Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. Next week, Mrs. Martinez's eyes filled with tears. I tried to find another placement here, but with Tommy's medical needs. Tommy sat silent on the worn couch, staring at his hands. It's okay, he said, though his voice betrayed him. I understand. Family comes first. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Family comes first. Wasn't that what the doctors had said when suggesting organ donation? That Michael's death could help other families? That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mansion felt emptier than usual, the silence deafening. In his home office, he pulled up his web browser and began researching foster care regulations, adoption procedures, medical guardianship requirements. The complexity was staggering, but he hadn't built a tech empire by shying away from challenges. By morning, he had a plan. By afternoon, he had a team of lawyers. But when he presented the idea to Tommy the next day, the boy's reaction wasn't what he expected. You want to adopt me? Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. They sat in the hospital cafeteria, where Tommy had just finished his monthly checkup. "Only if you want," Marcus hastened to add. "But you could stay in town, keep your doctors, your school." "Is it because of Michael's heart?" Tommy interrupted, his hand pressed against his chest. "Because I'm not him, Mr. Chen. I can't be him." Marcus felt as if he'd been slapped. "Tommy, no, that's not. Everyone always wants something from me," Tommy continued, words tumbling out. "The foster system wants me to be grateful. The doctors want me to be a success story. And now you," he stood abruptly, chair scraping against the linoleum. "I can't be a replacement son." "Tommy, wait," but the boy was already running, disappearing through the double doors. Marcus found him an hour later in the familiar setting of Sunset Grove, sitting before Michael's grave. "I used to imagine having a real family," Tommy said without looking up, "but not like this. Not because someone felt obligated." Marcus sat beside him in the snow. "When Michael died, I thought I'd never want to be a father again. The risk of losing another child." He shook his head. "But these past months, getting to know you, it's not about replacing Michael. It's about honoring him by opening my heart again, just like you did." Tommy picked at the frost on the grass. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up?" "Then we'll figure it out together." Marcus pulled out a folder. "I did some research. Did you know that heart transplant recipients who have stable, supportive homes show significantly better long-term outcomes?" "You're using statistics on me." For the first time that day, Tommy cracked a smile. "Hey, numbers never lie." Marcus grew serious. "I'm not trying to replace your birth family or make you into Michael. I see this amazing kid who loves science fiction and swimming, who talks to my son's grave because he wants to make sure his gift matters. And I think maybe we could help each other heal." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. There would be a lot of paperwork. "I have lawyers for that. And medical stuff. Monthly checkups, anti-rejection meds. We'll handle it together." And Tommy hesitated. "And you have to promise not to freak out if I'm not perfect." Marcus felt tears freeze on his cheeks. "Only if you promise the same for me." Tommy looked at Michael's headstone, then back at Marcus. "Can I still come talk to him?" "Every Saturday." "We both can." Snow began to fall, soft flakes catching in Tommy's dark hair. "What do we do first?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "First, I call my lawyers. Then we talk to Mrs. Martinez and your social worker. There will be home studies, interviews, probably some court appearances." "Sounds complicated," Tommy observed. "Life usually is." Marcus stood, offering his hand. "But that's what family is, for facing the complicated stuff together." Tommy took his hand, letting Marcus pull him up. At the grave, he paused. "Hey, Michael, I think your dad and I are going to try something new. I hope that's okay." As they walked back to the car, the snow falling steadily now, Marcus thought he felt something, a warmth in his chest, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Perhaps it was just imagination, but he could have sworn he heard Michael's laugh on the wind, blessing this new chapter in both their lives. Act 4: Resolution and Growth. Spring came to Sunset Grove in bursts of color: crocuses pushing through melting snow, cherry blossoms dusting the headstones in pale pink. Marcus and Tommy sat before Michael's grave, sharing a thermos of hot chocolate despite the warming weather. "The judge signed the papers this morning," Marcus said softly. "It's official." Tommy wrapped his hands around his steaming cup. "I know. I was there, remember?" "Right," Marcus chuckled. "Sorry. It still feels surreal." The adoption process had taken 6 months, lightning fast by normal standards, though every day had felt like an eternity. Home studies, background checks, medical evaluations, court appearances. Marcus had leveraged every connection he had, but in the end, it was Tommy's passionate speech to the judge that sealed the deal. "I used to think having Michael's heart meant I had to live 2 lives," Tommy said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Mine and his. Like I owed it to him to be extraordinary." Marcus turned to his new son. The word still sent a thrill through him. "And now I think," Tommy traced the letters on Michael's headstone. "I think maybe the extraordinary thing is just being alive. Being here. Being," he hesitated. "Being your son." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "You know, the day Michael died, I thought I'd never be happy again. I threw myself into work, built higher walls, pushed everyone away. But you, he placed his hand over Tommy's heart, their familiar gesture. You didn't just get Michael's heart. You helped me find mine again. Dad, Tommy's voice wavered on the word. Can I show you something? He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, his latest report card. Straight as in everything except P, where a solid B came with a note: Tommy shows remarkable improvement in stamina and participation. Michael would have gotten all, as Tommy said quietly. Stop. Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. You're not Michael, you're Tommy, my son, and I'm proud of you exactly as you are. Tommy's smile could have lit up the cemetery, even with the B. Especially with the B. It shows how hard you've worked. Marcus gestured at the medical bracelet on Tommy's wrist. You've overcome more than most people face in a lifetime. Michael, he touched the headstone. Michael would be proud too. The adoption party was small, just Mrs. Martinez, who'd delayed her move to Arizona to attend, Tommy's doctors, and a few close friends. They held it in the Chentec cafeteria, transformed for the evening with fairy lights and balloons. Tommy's new room in the mansion was ready, painted blue with glow in the dark stars on the ceiling, but with space left for his own touches. I have something for you, Marcus said that night, after the party. He led Tommy to his home office and unlocked a drawer he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a leather-bound journal. Michael's science notebook, he explained. He used to write down all his ideas about space travel, renewable energy, ways to make the world better. He handed it to Tommy. I think he'd want you to have it. Tommy held the journal reverently. Can we try some of his experiments together? I'd like that. 1 year later, they stood again at Michael's grave. The headstone had a new addition, a small plaque beneath the original inscription: beloved son and brother, whose gift of life created a bridge between two hearts. Ready for the big swim meet tomorrow? Marcus asked, adjusting Tommy's jacket against the October chill. Coach says I might even place this year. Tommy grinned. The new medication Dr. Singh prescribed is really helping with my stamina. Just remember. I know. No pushing too hard. Tommy rolled his eyes fondly. You're worse than Mrs. Martinez ever was. It's my job to worry. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. It's in the dad contract. They had developed their own traditions over the year. Saturday visits to Michael remained sacred, but now they brought tales of Tommy's science experiments, of Marcus's attempts at cooking, mostly disasters, of their growing family bond. The mansion echoed with laughter again, and if sometimes that laughter was punctuated by quiet moments of remembrance, well, that was part of healing too. Hey Michael, Tommy said, arranging fresh flowers by the headstone. Guess what? Dad's letting me intern at Chentec's medical research division next summer. They're working on improving anti-rejection medications. Maybe, he touched his chest. Maybe I can help other kids like me someday. Marcus watched his son, his living, breathing, amazing son, and felt Michael's presence more strongly than ever. Not as a ghost of what was lost, but as the bridge that had brought him and Tommy together. The foundation paperwork came through, he said. The Michael Chen Memorial Fund for Pediatric Transplant Research is officially operational, but Tommy beamed. He would have loved that. Using science to help people, it's exactly what he wanted to do. As they walked back to the car, Tommy slipped his hand into Marcus's, something he'd started doing recently, as if finally secure enough to show affection freely. Dad. Hashem. Do you think? Tommy paused. Do you think things happen for a reason? Like maybe Michael knew somehow that you'd need me as much as I needed you. Marcus thought about the mysterious ways love worked, about how loss and hope could intertwine like DNA strands, creating something new and precious. I think, he said carefully, that love is the greatest force in the universe. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it finds ways to heal our broken pieces by bringing us exactly what we need, even if it's not what we thought we were looking for. Tommy nodded, satisfied. As they reached the car, he turned back for one last look at the grave. The setting sun caught the gold inlay of Michael's name, making it shimmer like a star coming to life. Race you home? Tommy challenged, his grin pure mischief. Last one there has to try Dad's experimental lasagna. Hey, my cooking's not that bad. Their laughter echoed through Sunset Grove, a duet of joy and healing, of endings and beginnings, of love that transcended loss and found new ways to grow. And somewhere, Perhaps, Michael smiled, knowing his final gift had created not just one miracle, but two: a heart that beat with renewed purpose and a family reborn from the ashes of grief.